What do we got? We got the Legacy of MMO Dungeons. Bro, is that like just a stick? He lit a stick on fire. Bro, $5, that's like a paper towel a preach used to like wrap that shit around.
It's time to jam.
The rat. That looks good though. That's a good little scene.
You know, ever since we've been going on digital adventures, there's been one thing that's the focal point, whether we've been a sword-wielding laser master or some sort of wizard casting spells, and that is the dungeons. Let's ask ourselves, what is a dungeon for? Why are we so excited about them in our fantasy games? Stories and narrative are a huge factor. Look at the Dead Mines in World of Warcraft, uncovering the secrets of Edwin Van Cleef and his...
Bro, the Dead Mines are so good. Like, even to this day, I haven't played Dead Mines in forever, but I still remember the layout in my head because every little section of Dead Mines, it attempts to be really iconic for each little section. And then when you get to this last part and you see this gigantic ass ship with all these cannons sticking out, it's just like, whoa. Because you don't see anything like this in World of Warcraft. You don't see any other... Like, you see boats, but you don't see one armed to the teeth like this. It's like, whoa, this is a whole nother thing.
Defias or the Vaults in FF14, encroaching on the Heavens Ward and... no spoilers. Now that's a balance. Too much roleplaying and players get frustrated on repeat playthroughs. Look at the...
Oh, what was this? This was a dungeon in Wrath of the Lich King. And it was this stupid jousting bullshit. Oh my god, I hated doing this. When this was the daily or whatever, like when it first comes out, you're like, oh yeah, this is nice, this is cool, it's brand new. And eventually, you know, like you get decent doing these little joust things because you're allowed to practice it doing the dailies, and some of the dailies over here allow you to like practice because it's just the same thing. But doing it, like, you know, there's so much RP here is what he's getting at. And it's really annoying. It's like, I just want to enter the dungeon and start.
Pain caused by Trial of the Crusader in Wrath of the Lich King.
Yeah.
'Cause apparently, the devs thought, at the time, standing around for 2.5 minutes doing absolutely nothing every time you went into the dungeon was really engaging gameplay.
No.
Not just the story, though. It's about the loot. Dungeons contain those big, shiny items. They give you massive experience, huge quest turn-ins. So needless to say, dungeons are a very big deal, and players want them. But game...
One of the main attractors of dungeons, at least in World of Warcraft with my own experience, is that it's like dungeons don't take like a really long time to set up. Yes, you need 4 other dudes to come in. One of them has to be a tank, 1 a healer, and then 3 DPS as far as like World of Warcraft goes. But it takes the logistics of getting together a dungeon group are far less than trying to get like a coherent 10-man or a 25-man or even a 40-man. I couldn't even imagine that. I've never done a 40-man, nor do I want to. 5, I think, is a pretty good sweet spot for MMOs. I mean, shit, honestly, if they could make it so that you could, like, maybe not do it solo, but, like, maybe, like, 2 or 3 people or something like that. There's no real content in MMOs that, to my knowledge, I mean, besides, like, party quests, that you can get, like, 2 or 3 dudes together and then just do that content.
Dungeons have come a long way over the years, And it turns out that the people who made the original dungeons in MMOs didn't really know what to make in the first place. So today, my friends, we are going on an adventure to the past. We're going to look at where the MMO dungeons came from, where they're ultimately going, and what makes the perfect MMO dungeon.
Ooh, all right. Oh. The maze. Bro, all this shit started in D&D. Literally, it all started in D&D again.
All right, first things first. How big should a dungeon be? How long should it take in an MMO? Those of you who've played like the original World of Warcraft or Classic will realize and probably notice that the first dungeons that came with the game were very different than what came after, and that's including before the Burning Crusade. You see, the people who made World of Warcraft had to design the dungeons on what they knew and what they thought was cool. And in order to find out what that was, we're gonna have to go back to the 1990s.
Oh, dang.
You see, in the first MMOs like EverQuest back in '99 by Daybreak,
what am I looking
they had
at?
to design their dungeons based on what they knew, but they didn't have much in the virtual world to draw on. What they did have, though, were board games. Take what you see in your head during those massive sessions of D&D and then make that in the virtual world. For example, the first dungeons weren't even instanced. 5 years ago,
Bro, that's actually really cool to think about. The fact that dungeons weren't instanced. Like I think in like classic WoW, they attempted to do what do you call it? Like the outside dungeons, and they just sectioned it off with like walls or whatever. And I thought that was a pretty cool concept. And I think I did it like one time when I played WoW Classic, and I never like at the time I never did it before. And when I did it, I was like, "Oh wow, this is what I was missing. This is pretty cool."
Stats wrote a book called The WoW Diary. And who's he, might you ask? Well, he's the guy who built many of the areas that you guys love in World of Warcraft. Outdoor areas, raids, dungeons, including the infamous and everyone's favorite, Wailing Caverns. In the book, he explains that he spent so long building Wailing Caverns, based only on the information, right? That it would be a cave with dinosaurs in it. Go wild. So he spends all his time building it. Then he goes to his boss, Jeff Kaplan, and he says, "Here,
bro, Wailing Cavern. I remember doing Wailing Caverns multiple times. And Wailing Caverns is huge. Like, it's an investment when you take just some average level players and you try to do that shit. Ugh, it is a trudge. I think there was like one time it took like maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours just to complete it all. Because when you do it, there's some quests that you grab, like up here or whatever. Let's see, like there's some dungeons there. All these like quests right here. It says Wailing Caverns right here. You have to go inside and complete them. Like, kill this monster. It's got a little thing it drops. Kill this other monster. It probably has another little thing it drops. I think there's like a piece in here where you gotta collect mushrooms or something, or I forget, but grabbing a bunch of quests and having a reason to enter a dungeon I think it's really cool. The issue comes when you're ready to do a dungeon, but not everybody else is. That's the main thing.
Here you go. Here's Wailing Caverns, to which Jeff says, "Cool, now you can start building the dungeon." It turns out he'd just been making the waiting area. And the instance portal originally was supposed to be the front of the cave, but now it was going to be at the back of the cave. So John goes back to his PC, right, and starts making more and more dungeon. And every time he turns his work in, his boss Jeff Kaplan tells him to go bigger. The exact words were, and I quote, "There is no such thing as a dungeon that's too big.
Oh my god.
When in doubt, make it bigger."
Bro, Wailing Caverns is fucking massive, dude. It's ridiculous how massive it is because, like, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bosses, and there's a ton of backtracking. So let's say you start right here, and it's like, oh, where's one boss? And then, ooh, there's another boss. Another boss. Oh, let's backtrack. Oh, boom, another boss. Oh, and I don't know where to go from here. It's like this is like a bridge over top some shit or whatever. And isn't there like a mini boss over here somewhere? It's like you have to go down here, or maybe it was like up here. There's a boss right there. You go across or something. I don't freaking remember. That just goes to show you how long I play. And then once you get all this shit, it's like you have to go back, and then you can just jump down and go back to the center. And I think this was the final boss right there. It's like it's arduous. It is an adventure when you go through Wailing Caverns.
So he ends up adding more and more. Just look at these screenshots of the iterations of what he did. And then in a Reddit AMA, he points out that Wailing Caverns actually had way more stuff that eventually got cut, including mazes and all sorts of stuff.
Like, it's too big.
Recently, I played WoW Hardcore. Had the absolute best time.
Like, I can imagine when he said that you can never make a dungeon too big. It's like, if you got 5 other motherfuckers, all like quest log full of dungeon quests, and you just start a session, like you get your boys, you get your session ready. It's like, okay, great. I would imagine he probably thought like you'd start this dungeon at the beginning of your session, and then you get done with the dungeon. It's going to be like 3 or 4 hours later. All right. And from that perspective, I think it's cool. It's a good idea. It's like a cool idea in concept, but in practicality, it doesn't work out that much. Like, if you got like a core group of friends that you know and you can rely on, then great, it works. But for the most part, people don't have that many friends when they're jumping into MMOs to fill out like a 5-man dungeon, to start the session in the beginning and then go do all this. And you need like a GPS, you need Google Maps, you need a Garmin to figure out which way you're going, forward, backward, left, right, X, Y, Z axis. Did we get this boss? No. Okay, we got to go back and collect this thing from this other boss. All right, and then we go back. It's a lot, man. It really is.
And died.
It's over.
It's Jover.
But during that run, I got to do Wailing Caverns again. Now, I've done Wailing Caverns probably 50 to 60 times over my course of playing WoW, and I still get lost in there.
And still get lost. Done it 50 times. That is the maze. All right? This man lives and breathes MMOs. Done it 50 times and still get lost.
Jeff, no, dungeons can be too big.
Yeah.
So my team did some digging and went back over all the dungeons that have existed in MMOs for a long, long time. On average, back in like the early 2000s, it would take something like 40 minutes to an hour to do a dungeon on average. And the theory that we found after doing some research was that
What do you say, an hour or two on average? That is probably for average level players. All right, average to maybe slightly above average level players. But I would say for the majority of the part, if you're just stepping into the dungeon for the first time, it's going to take at least double that.
players would intentionally be taking breaks during these dungeons. That was the design idea. And then they would come back later to finish up. Or it was intended that they just wouldn't finish the dungeon every time they went to do it.
Oh. So you do a couple bosses, come back to the center, take a break. Go do a couple bosses, come back to the center, take a break. Well, from that perspective, I can kind of get behind it. That's a little more healthier of an approach. I never really thought about it like that. I've been the times that I've played WoW, it's just okay. Let's start the dungeon and let's just get it over with. I've never really considered like taking a break in there. Huh.
Why do you think that Alderman has 2 entrances? That's why. They expect you to go in, spend a good portion of your day in there, come out, go for lunch, then come back and regroup later and finish it up, or just stop halfway. Not just WoW either, right? Let's look at other games. Guild Wars 2 had a lot of the same devs that worked on early WoW go over there to make it, and they did the same again. That's what they knew. Big, sprawling 40-minute dungeons, but they had a new idea to go with it, right? Every dungeon would have multiple pathways through it. Let me give you this map of the Ascalonian Catacombs.
Oh my goodness. What? Bro, let me see this. Where do you even start? I see like diamonds. Like, are these diamonds bosses? Or what are these little squares? This is crazy, dude. God dang. This is some content right there. Oh my god.
As you can see, you just go left, you go right, you go down, then you go up, and then you come around, and then you circle up and you go there, and that's one run. But then you can go right.
Bro, you know what this kind of reminds me of? This kind of reminds me of the first time I saw the PoE skill tree. Like, if I'm a brand new player and I just look at the PoE skill tree, I'm like, holy fucking shit, this is massive. This is overwhelming. This is intimidating. If I'm brand new to MMOs and I look at the layout of this gigantic dungeon, I'm like, holy shit. Is there someone around me that can carry me? Please, help me, God.
Right, you can turn around and then you can come back up through the pathway and then you can go up there and then you get a second run out of it. But if you want to do another one, you can do that too. You can come back round and go up there and then you can circle back round to yourself, but cross over the path of the first one. Of course you're going to do that. And then you finish up on the third dungeon. You got lost? I gave you a map. But of course, as with all things, time changes and they started to get player feedback. And shockingly, it turned out, and you won't believe this, you won't.
Yo, that shit too big, man.
Players didn't like spending 3 or 4 hours getting a group together, to go to a dungeon, to not finish it, and to get lost. And they also didn't like going down to a dungeon and just hanging around hoping people would show up to get a group.
Yeah. Yeah, people don't do that.
Weird. So it was time for a change, and they sat down and they got their heads together to try and make their audience feel better, because it turned out not everybody playing games was capable of gaming for 16 plus hours a day, which were the people who made these games. So they had to design them for that wider audience. And you'll see that. The best example you'll see is like Diamol and Scarlet Monastery, which came later. They were then still big giant dungeons, but broken up into nice 20 to 30 minute sections. You could go down and do the whole thing, sure, but you could also just go Diamol East, Diamol West, Scarlet Library, etc, etc, etc.
Yeah.
Gone were those twisty, windy corridors and mazes. Now we were pretty linear. And gone were those big precipices where little Joey on a bad day fumbled his controller and fell down into a hole, ruining the whole run. And what we had now was nice, simple chunks. By Wrath of the Lich King, most dungeons have been reduced to just 20-minute runs. Nice and simple. There were a couple of extras, sure, like Arnket the Old Kingdom. Doing that whole place is a good 40-minute run if you do the optional bosses. And we always do the optional bosses, don't we?
No, we don't always do the optional bosses.
Now, I've talked mainly about WoW, but all the games did this. Let's go over to the Weeb camp.
Oh yeah, because WoW was leading the charge in MMOs, and every other MMO was trying to be like WoW. Oh, WoW was so popular, I wonder why. Look at their dungeons. Oh, I guess that's what everybody likes. Let's everybody else just copy what WoW did.
By Stormblood in Final Fantasy XIV, they found the formula that worked best for them. And since that point, every single dungeon has been almost identical in flow. Now, their dungeons are all very story-focused. Loot is a very secondary concern, so the gameplay is formulaic to tell a story in the best way. It has a straight pathway, a new biome after each boss, and a pretty set 20-minute completion time for the average group. Literally, every single dungeon since then until now has followed this exact formula. By design, Yoshi P, hallowed be his name, Yoshi P had an interview with Famitsu where he talked about dungeon design specifically. Yoshi P said, in the first place, the dungeons in FF14, with the exception of some early dungeons, are basically a single path. Now, I can get my hands on the dungeons I made in the early days, and no longer do I get lost. The reason for this is that in order to easily play multiplayer without wasting a lot of time, side paths are unnecessary.
True.
And even if they were provided, players would only be able to take the optimal route. For the Guild Wars 2 guys, they did exactly the same thing. They entirely removed their dungeon system and replaced it with a new system that suited their player base called fractals. These were 10 to 20 minute drop in, drop out, fast played content.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. I had no idea. I never played Guild Wars 2.
Now the 20-minute stuff is kind of the really hard stuff. Everything else, 10 minutes, in and out, easy fun. Elder Scrolls Online, exactly the same thing again. They made all their dungeons that sweet 20-minute mark. I don't get it, right? It's like they all got together. They put on their hoods, they sat around the MMO Cabal table, and they all universally decided that for a multiplayer game, 20 minutes is the exact amount of time it should take. I did a little Twitter poll.
I mean, taking 20 minutes to do a dungeon, it seems pretty reasonable, man, because think about it. If it depends on, it's going to be on a game by game per basis, but you have to think, does your game have an LFG to be like, okay, you can just queue into this dungeon and this dungeon finder thing will just pair you up with all of the, you know, people that you need. You need a tank, you need a healer, 3D DPS, or whatever the thing is for your game. And you're chilling in there for like, what, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on your role. And then, okay, let's just say it's about 10 minutes, all right? Or maybe if you're a DPS, okay, it takes 15 minutes. And it also, this takes into, you got to take into context, did the MMO just drop, so there's a lot of people playing it? Or is it like a year or two in, and the player base is kind of fallen off? So that way, if you queue into like a specific dungeon, but nobody is within like your level range, and it's mostly DPS queuing, then your queue time is going to be like 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes where you're just sitting in the queue. All right. So automatically you're going to be looking at a 40, 45 minutes, 50, maybe more time to just get people in like together. All right.
20 minutes. Everybody said the same thing. Anything longer than 20 minutes starts to be a hassle for people. It takes too long to set up, too long to do, and they have other things to get on with, so they have to book an evening. Too short, and it becomes like More of Souls in Legion, where people just storm through it and they don't care about the dungeon whatsoever. No story, no fun. Oh, but Preacher, World of Warcraft does have non-linear dungeons. Have you never seen the MDI? Lots of different routes and pathways. Yeah, of course I have. Taylor Sanders, the WoW encounter designer, actually brought this up super recently. In that, he describes that they add non-linearity to World of Warcraft dungeons just to keep it a little spicy, but remember, through Mythic Plus and their affixes, they're able to force players to take different routes rather than the optimal route. But realistically, it's just new optimal routes.
For each new season, we like to have a mix of dungeons that are more linear, but also mix that up with dungeons that are more open, like Ataldazar.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah, I think that's fine to have like some linear dungeons and a few open choose your own path type dungeon. I think that's fine.
Waycrest Manor in a way to try to, you know, keep some variety in there, and players who enjoy routing can have some options, you know, to really like sink their teeth into.
You guys know by now, Mythic Plus changed the way dungeons work. They made them into a pure go, go, go efficient way of doing things. But
Yeah, but the MDI is a 1% of the player base type thing. If you're choosing to design dungeons around the MDI or whatever, like a 1% of players of the player base is gonna do, then like average level players will not play the game anywhere near what MDI players will play the game like. It's just, it's crazy to think like that.
that also removed all the sense of exploration and adventure, and that has consequences. Let's look at Uldaman, for example, right? In 2004, it had all that sense of wonder and adventure that you would come to know from like an original Zelda title. You would go and defeat the dwarves, connect the 3 pieces of the staff, plant it into a scale model of the city, and then bright shining lights would come through it, glaring onto the door, and then the maiden would come stomping through to try and destroy you. Recently, Ulduman was remade. All that is gone in terms of efficiency. All to give that go, go, go prospect the credit it deserves in Mythic Plus, but as a dungeon, it's lost a lot of things. And this has been a ripple effect across many games. So what would you prefer? Would you like that streamlined, linear experience, or would you want that sense of exploration and wonder? I imagine your first impression is, yeah, I want to explore, but not if I have to repeat it every single week.
Oh, yeah, that's actually a really good point. Doing it over and over again. What is it called? The novelty of open dungeons is really nice the first couple of times, but if you go off of the blueprint that WoW has created with like doing dailies, you literally dread doing the open non-linear dungeon whenever that shit pops up on the daily or whatever. All right, it just sucks.
But for sure, I do miss that sense of wonder and excitement, those hold your breath moments that I look forward to every single week where I turn the UI off and watch what's going on. And I absolutely definitely prefer that to planning out a route in an add-on before we even step inside.
Bro, did he just use like the same stick and just constantly wrap the like paper towel around this shit? What is this? Like the third or the fourth area? He's like doing the torch thing. This is so funny.
I'm afraid this group is full, laddie.
Oh yeah.
Next time.
Oh yeah. Here we go. Here you go. This is the real divider. Getting the group in the first place.
Stupid travelers. Okay, we're gonna do a dungeon then. But that involves one of the biggest nightmares of all time. Other people.
Yeah.
Honestly, finding other people for a dungeon can be really rough. Of course, in World of Warcraft, you're going to need a full job history, the bank statements for the last 6 years, and proof of identity of your mother's shoes before you're going to be invited into a group.
Yep. What spec are you? Are you the good spec or are you the shit spec? Are you playing the shit spec? No, we don't want you, dude. No, we're full. I'm sorry, man. Oh, what's your Raider IO score? Is it like 2,000? No, that's too low, man. I'm sorry, man. And this is a thing that has been I think unique to WoW and maybe to other MMOs. In MMO, like, so from an FPS player perspective, with a ladder. Here, let me put it like this. There's pubs and there's like the ladder. Pubs is like, you get into the game. Let's use Apex for an example. You get into the firing range. You mess around with the guns. You learn the movement. You learn how to shoot and shit like that. Then you go into pubs, which is like everybody. And okay, you start learning how to react to everything. It's like you're still learning the game, so on and so forth. And it's like that with MMOs. The first couple of times you do a dungeon, it's okay to not be so great. It's okay to explore. It's okay to make mistakes and so on and so forth, because in World of Warcraft, all the dungeons, there's varying levels of difficulty with all the dungeons. What is it? There's like normal, heroic, and once you hit mythic, there's multiple tiers in mythic, and every tier you go up, it gets a little bit harder, up to like mythic like 25 and higher maybe. I don't know. But for the most part, after the novelty of a dungeon wears off and you do it the first couple times, players want to play with other players that are similarly skilled as them. And it's the same with FPS. That's why a lot of FPS games will have a ladder system. All right, there's bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, whatever else, other ranks you want, so on and so forth. At least the FPS genre attempts to put similarly skilled players together. When it comes to MMOs and dungeons, they don't even attempt to try to stick similarly skilled players together. They just let the players figure it out, all right? And when you do that, players, you're going to leave it to the players to try to figure out some sort of way to figure out if you as a rando are good or bad. Are you good? Okay, you can play with us because we're of this similar skill level. And then are you bad? Okay, maybe we're not the group for you. We don't feel like caring, all right? There's no system in World of Warcraft or any MMO that allows for this type of like ranking between, I mean, because shit, you think like it's hard to put stats on like an FPS ladder or as like a character. Like, let's say you're a character, you start queuing games, and it's like the game will track your stats. It's like how much you move, how much you slide, what's your accuracy with this gun and that gun, and so on and so forth. So it can come up with some sort of elo for your account. It's like, okay, this guy's this level of skill. I think of how difficult it is to try to figure out some sort of elo for an MMO player. All right, it's literally impossible. You can't do that because I don't know. It's not feasible really. But leave it to the players to figure out how with external add-ons.
In other games, it's like LFG and auto matchmaking that makes it work, which most people prefer, but not always.
Yep.
I mentioned earlier that in EverQuest, dungeons were these outdoor, non-instance, sprawling areas, and that Wailing Cavern's first design turned out to not be a dungeon at all, but a waiting area. So
check out that 360.
This. Back in the day, the developers really thought what players wanted to do was head down to a dungeon and then just hang around, kill stuff, and then hope and pray that someone would just show up and they would do the same thing. And then eventually a tank, a healer, 3 DPS would also show up. So
this is a fair assumption back in the day when the internet wasn't really as big as it is today. Oh, if you want to go do a dungeon, just walk over there and maybe you'll find some people just lounging around, also waiting around to do a dungeon. All right. Now, modern day gaming comes along with modern day problems, and everything is meted the fuck out of. Like all that shit I said before. Are you playing the good spec? Are you playing this? Are you playing that? So on and so forth.
you could go off and eventually do your dungeon. And it's why they created all those outdoor areas just full of mobs to kill. And you know what? Some players just didn't like that. This is why, right? All them old school dungeons, your Black Fathom Dapes, your BRDs, your Wailing Caverns, your Aldermans, they all have these like weird outdoor areas that are just full of mobs because they intended you to just go down there and grind until people showed up. You've got to remember something here. Up until very close to World of Warcraft's release, quests weren't designed to give experience. They were just breadcrumbs to take you to somewhere else. It was only recently that they decided that maybe just grinding enemies wasn't the way you should level in MMOs. It's not actually until the World of Warcraft beta opened that they got all this feedback, and the devs were genuinely surprised and shocked that people didn't enjoy this. In Wrath of the Lich King, they came up with the LFD system, but darkness fell on the world. Because you suddenly realize
the plague of casuals. Oh my god. That is so bad.
that all those players you see running around nearby, well, they might not be as good as you are.
Yep. Here we go. Here we go. Bro, like, here. Oh, wait, sorry. Flashbang. There we go. So, like, when you think of... No, that's the paint bucket. Is this big enough? Okay, sure. Tools, brushes. Here, can we do big brush? Okay, sure. When you think of, like, the skill, like the bell curve, let's say that's 50%, that's 0, that's 100. It's like, oh, bell curve goes up, bell curve goes down. All right. This is like a normal bell curve. But with MMOs and the emergence of LFD in Wrath, this is what people will say happened here. Let's, how do I do this? Like file undo? Whatever. Can I just do paint bucket again? And okay. Don't save here. This is what it feels like actually happens. There's like your halfway point. It feels like this sometimes. Like this is 0 and this is 100. This is like your 50th percentile. And it honestly, it feels like this. Ooh, like that. That's what it feels like sometimes with the emergence of LFD. There's a lot of people that are me. Maybe it's more like this. It's like up until this point. Maybe it's more like that. That's what it feels like sometimes. Most people struggle to reach the 50th percentile because back in the day when I first started playing World of Warcraft, I clicked all my moves, all right? And there's a ton of more unique players jumping into the MMO genre for the first time, and they don't know the rules of engagement for MMOs, okay? They don't know you're supposed to keybind all your moves or buy like an MMO mouse with all those little thumb buttons on the side or whatever, all right? They don't know that. So there's a ton of things that are implied from MMOs that aren't explicitly said. What the foot? Whoa, oh my God. Bro, that's a strong ass fucking desk, dude. Holy shit. I do that on my desk. Oh my God, my shit is tilting over. Oh, what are you bouncing for, dude?
This is really tough to solve and has been plaguing several games for years. The fact is, right, players have a wildly different ability level. Random matchmaking is really only useful if the thing you are queuing into is pretty basic. Once the difficulty goes up, just pairing up anyone who is capable of clicking the join queue button just doesn't work anymore.
Because the unique problem of WoW is that you have multiple different problems going on. You have potentially visual clutter and particle effects going on. This is a jumble of I don't know how many bad guys. I mean, it looks like maybe 1 or 2. And then you got your teammates that are around this shit. They all have like positional things to do. They probably all want to be on the backside. They don't want to be in front of the boss. You got the tank in front of the boss, and hopefully the boss doesn't cleave, because if the boss does cleave and there's like a melee somewhere and he's on there, he's gonna get hit by the cleave too. All right, like there's just so much visual clutter sometimes, not all the time. And it's not just by the bosses, it's also the players. The players bring a lot of visual clutter too. And not only that, you need to be able to see. So you have to have the right like little character health bars and shit. Because in World of Warcraft, that shit is pretty basic bitch. All right, and then you have to memorize all these buttons. You have to, and it's even harder if you're a healer. I mean, you got all these like 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 like dudes right here, and it's like they're doing the dungeon with a 4-man, and one dude is dead. It's of course the DPS is dead. It's like there's just so many things that are expected of even an average level player for an MMO. You have to have the right add-ons. You have to memorize your keybinds, and just memorizing this is like a pain in the dick. All right, there's just so many things.
World of Warcraft's Cataclysm saw the effects of this. Wrath dungeons were too easy, so they tried to bring some difficulty back, and it just didn't work. The success rate was so low that people left the game, and Blizzard had to nerf them all. Other games saw this and made their queuable content so easy and matchmaking for harder stuff, but of course, it's back again. Consequences. All the other games, they just kept it simple. They had a distinct gap between the normal and pretty rewarding system that was the queuable content, and then the prestige of the harder matchmaking content with just no in between.
Yeah.
FF14, for example, recently introduced the variant dungeons, after, of course, all the hordes of Western players yearned for harder dungeon content. Their solution was an extremely easy explorer mode with a great twist. The outcomes of the dungeon had many possibilities depending on what the players did during the run. It created a wonderful puzzle to solve with hidden bosses, etc. for them to find. But then, 2 hard modes that very quickly gave seasoned players a wall to climb in a smaller 4-man environment. Guild Wars 2 added a gearing system called Agony that actively time-gated players from climbing the ranks of fractals until they had clearly tested their mettle in the earlier content. I personally think most players would prefer every single piece of content to be queuable and to suit their personal schedules and lifestyle, but the reality is that in practice, it just doesn't work. I find if you aren't someone who enjoys joining a regular group or a guild, then FF14 system is the best, but ultimately, match-made systems in MMOs are going to be less rewarding than setup groups, and if they weren't, they would kill a huge part of the game for many players, as the content would have to be so easy. Dungeons are expected, and they're an exciting part of any adventure, especially in MMOs. So think about what is best, especially with everything we've seen today, with all the devs and their opinions and what they created and what they had to change. I took to Twitter to find out what you guys think is perfect. I got a ton of responses, and the answers were almost universal. Players want large, epic, grand dungeons that they can go to, be fully immersed in, and adventure through with a story to tell afterwards. But they don't.
That's actually, I mean, that's fine. Again, when you're playing an MMO, the first time you do a dungeon, you want that grand ass, like rock and roll fucking guitar, chorus, orchestra type effect. But if the game forces you to do that dungeon over and over again in some way, shape, or form, then it's just like you want to get through it.
Don't want to farm them like that. They want non-linear, interesting environments with choices to make and coordination, but no longer than 20 minutes. Players want interesting trash with crowd control, interrupts, solid teamwork and gameplay, while still being able to do enormous AoE damage and blast everything to death. So with all that in mind, what is the best dungeon ever made?
Oh,
My personal favorite dungeon that I've ever done was Eye of Ashara.
Halls of Reflection. Stratholm.
All right, my favorite dungeon is Halls of Valor.
My favorite dungeon is Shadowfang Keep.
My all-time favorite dungeon is Cathedral of Eternal Night.
I'm gonna go with the Feeder.
there are so many different answers. And I would say all of these people are pretty high level MMO players for the most part. They're all way better than me, and they're all giving vastly different answers.
Of Pain.
Amarok from Final Fantasy XIV.
Oh, yeah, that's got to be Waycrest Manor.
100% it's got to be VC.
My favorite dungeon is Mount Golg.
Hazavesh, Solia's Gambit.
My favorite dungeon is Halls of Reflection.
Hi, I'm Dratnos, and my favorite dungeon is Tazavesh, the Veiled Market.
Stormstout Brewery.
I don't have like a favorite dungeon, but I have like favorites. And I think it's the Vault.
As you guys can see, everybody has a different answer.
Yeah.
Everybody wants something slightly different, which of course makes it super difficult for the people behind the scenes to make something that appeases everybody. And the fact is, it can't happen. But having said that, what do I think is the quintessential MMO dungeon? My actual pinnacle of MMO dungeon design? Well, it goes old school. It's the Dead Mines in World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
The Dead Mines for me represents everything good about an adventure in a dungeon that is also repeatable and farmable and gets me excited every single time I get to go there. There is so much story going on through the different environments you go on, to that grand opening into the Archway and seeing that ship down in the cove waiting to be attacked. We have big moments like Mr. Smite running at you with his hammer, sitting in the cannon to blow the doors off, the Goblin lurking in his foundry, and then of course to top it all, Van Cleef waiting for us. And then even after that, we get some extras. We see Cookie running around on the bottom for so a little bit of extra loot. And every time I think about it, it's a perfect amount of time. Every single thing is put in with such care and detail and attention. And I struggle to think, despite the amazing dungeons that I've visited over the last few years, there's something that I think about as regularly as the Dead Mines. And when it comes up, everything about it makes me smile. Of course, we have ignored one aspect of dungeons that is pretty important. And that is them shinies.
The loot?
Thank you so much for coming along on this adventure with us. This video was something that has been burning in our minds for ages to look at all the dungeons, especially after a Project MMO, and frankly, we love making them. As you've seen on YouTube, we have changed direction a little bit. Our focus is primarily on these big legacy style videos. It's what we were known for, it's what you guys loved in the past, and it's what we want to do. So if you want to support us a little bit more than hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell, you can head over to our website where you can help support us and get access to behind the scenes footage and all that kind of stuff. So thank you again, guys, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Sweet. Oh, bloopers. Big as fuck. Oh my god, this is so funny. Like, the last MMO I played was WoW, and it was Wrath of the Lich King, and I dipped out when Old War came out. I was just like, okay, game's too hard. Oh, there's a ton of favoritism in the guild. This is stupid. I'm out. And luckily, that was before they came in with the WoW token, so I think I dipped out at the right time. So, yeah, this was a great video. This was awesome. You know, MMOs, yes, they're a big investment, and to try to figure out how to make dungeons is a really tough problem. But I think there are certain game companies that are still up for the challenge, and there are a ton of good MMOs waiting to come out, and I'm kind of excited to play some of them. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. So, yeah, I mean, I want to see more videos like this for Preach. This was awesome. Definitely. But that's pretty much it. All right. So I'll catch you guys on the next one. And you guys take care. Later.